Alright, what up everybody, Colt94 back now with another video. This one is going to be my PS3 collection update video for 2024. I'm pretty sure this is like the third or fourth time I've been updating my PS3 collection from the start of my channel. Hope you guys who've either stuck around or kind of seen one or two every now and then have enjoyed seeing the growth of the collection, and I've tried to pick up a couple games that I get recommended every now and then, so hopefully it kind of feels like, for those of you who have been around for a long time, that you guys are kind of growing the collection yourselves as well by recommendations and stuff. As always with my collection videos, what I'll be doing is first giving a little description of the game, then giving a rating out of 10 if I played the game or if I beat the game or whatever, just so you guys get a general sense of what the game's about and my thoughts on it. I find these videos are great for giving recommendations because it goes over such a broad catalog of games that this is usually where if I'm on YouTube, will find my recommendations for games I want to try, so hopefully I can do that as well for you guys. Thanks for everybody tuning into the video, hope you guys enjoy it, and let's just get right into the collection. So starting off the video, we have Red Faction Armageddon. This is a game I have not played, and this first little section, this first stack, will be games I have not played yet that are in my collection on my going to play at some point stack, and games that I'm currently in the middle of playing, so it'll be a kind of mix of both. So first up, Red Faction Armageddon, haven't got into it yet. Heard it's a pretty good, I think it's a third person or first person shooter if I'm not mistaken. I heard the first one was a lot better than the second, but I bought both, so I figured if I'm going to give the series a shot, I might as well give both games a shot. Alright, next up we got the Ratchet & Clank trilogy. Yes, the manual has a lot of water damage. This wasn't from me, this was the previous owner of the game. Ratchet & Clank classic game series. I played the first one on the PS2. The other ones in this I have not given a shot yet. I know the first one's insanely good. That game's like a 9 or 10 out of 10. But the other two I haven't tried out yet. Hopefully they're as good as the first one. Alright, next up we have The Godfather 2. This is one of those kind of Mafia GTA style of games where it's like a big open world, you lead like a crime family, so I'm looking forward to get into it. Honestly, the reason I haven't cracked this one open yet is because it's a decently easy game to get a platinum, but there's some kind of finicky trophies they have to go for, so I'm waiting for the right moment where I really want to go for a platinum, and then I'll pop this one in. Next up we have Enslaved Odyssey to the West. This is a game that I think it was Metal Jesus Rocks, if I'm not mistaken, recommended a while ago, and I think it was in one of his Hidden Gems video. I picked it up, I saw it at a store for like 15 bucks, so I picked it up hoping to crack it open at some point. I'm pretty sure it's like a puzzle action platformer, if I'm not mistaken. I could be completely wrong on that. I have not played this game yet, so hopefully it's decent. Next up, we got Disney Infinity. I have not cracked this open yet. I don't have any of the characters, so maybe one day I'll get a character and give it a shot. I got it for $1, so you know, can't go wrong with Disney Infinity for $1, I guess. But maybe one day I'll crack it open. Next up we have Prototype. This is one I'm actually partway through. I dropped it. I can't remember what came out, but something came out on the PS5 that I was really looking forward to, and my goal was to beat this game before that came out, but I never got to it. It's like a kind of Infamous like game. I think they get compared a lot. Kind of a hack and slash, a little bit of like powers, you can kind of shoot a bit, and you play as like kind of this supernatural being. I would say not as good as the Infamous games, but a pretty solid game. I'd give it like a 7.5 from what I played out of it. Red Dead Undead Nightmare, heard it's pretty good. It follows the same kind of gameplay and kind of loop that the Rockstar games are known for. It's a third-person shooter, little RPG mechanics, basically basic questing. I do like the Red Dead universe. I really like the first game, so I will eventually bust this open, just haven't got around to it. Then we got the Game of Thrones game. This is not the Telltale one. This is I think it's a hack and slash game if I'm not mistaken. It's made by Atlas. From what I've heard, it's actually pretty hard. I have not busted it open yet. I'm going through a little bit of a hack and slash kick, so maybe this one will be soon, but I have, as you'll see coming up soon, I have a lot of games on the go at the moment for the PS3, so this one might have to wait for a bit. Then we have Red Faction Guerrilla, which I think is technically in the series a second or first game, if I'm not mistaken, but it's the one before Armageddon. I've heard this one's actually really good. I haven't busted it open yet. Again, I'm pretty sure it's a third person or first person shooter. And if I'm not mistaken, these are pretty long games. So I do want to bust open these ones soon. I just don't know when exactly that will be. Alright, next up we have Driver San Francisco. I'm going to be straight up, I don't know too much about this game. It looks like it's some sort of story-driven kind of undercover cop thing. Hopefully it's decent. I got it for pretty cheap, so it's in really good condition, so eventually I'll bust it open, but who knows. Then we got CSI Crime Scene Investigation Fatal Conspiracy. I was a decent fan of the show. These games seems like it follows the show pretty closely in terms of what they're going for. I think it's basically you're playing through a couple, I don't know, cases that would be kind of like episodes in a show. From the looks of it, it's like a kind of point and click whodunit kind of game. I do enjoy those games from time to time. This, however, is another one like Godfather 2, where I've kind of bought it partially to get a platinum for it. The next up, we got Alice Madness Returns. This one's actually sealed. It won't be sealed for long because this is one I'm actually really excited to finally get my hands on. When I originally was starting to collect for the PS3, I always saw it in the game store, and I really debated on picking it up, but never went through with it. It's like a twisted, kind of dark version of the Alice in Wonderland story. I think it's a third-person, like, kind of hack and slash puzzle game, if I'm not mistaken. I could be completely wrong on that, but I know it's set up in the Alice universe. I'm really interested to see what this one's about. Then we got Assassin's Creed Rogue. This one's still sealed as well. I get kind of the itch to play Assassin's Creed games every now and then. They're third-person stealth games. This one kind of falls under the Black Flag kind of combat and gameplay, if you know what that's about. It has some boat combat, follows kind of the original 3 Assassin's Creeds in terms of combat and stealth mechanics. It's not like the new ones where they're like hack and slash RPGs. These ones are the classic, more stealth oriented ones. So basically this one will eventually fill my Assassin's Creed kick that I got on like probably once every 2 years. Alright, now we got the first of one of the games I'm actually playing through currently, and that's the Saboteur. I put a little French spin on it just to kind of nail the kind of, I don't know, essence this game goes for. So this is a pretty interesting game by Pandemic. Honestly, wish they didn't go under. They usually made pretty solid games. So this one's about the French Revolution. You basically played a guy known as the Saboteur, and he's, I think, an Irish person who's like a race car driver, if I'm not mistaken. And basically it's kind of set up like an open world RPG, third person shooter, kind of like a GTA, but it has this unique effect stylistically that it goes for, where everything will start off gray in Nazi controlled areas because it's about Nazi Germany and them taking over France and kind of you starting a resistance. And then once you take over an area or influence it, it will become all colored and stuff like that. It's really cool, really unique game. I'd recommend it. I'd probably give it, so far what I've played out of it, something like an 8. Alright, the next up we have Darksiders. This is currently the game I'm focusing on and actively playing through. I kind of go in and out of the current games that I'm playing through, but this is the one I'm playing through the most at the moment. Really cool hack and slash game, really dark and gritty story. The main character, War, is very interesting. It's about like angels and demons and the riders of the apocalypse, which is one of the ones you play as. This is War. He's the one you play as. Cool combat, nice upgrade system. Really recommend it if you're into hack and slash games. Probably a solid like 7.5, 8. Alright, now we got more games that I have not gotten to at all. So this is Operation Flashpoint Red River. I've heard from a comment that this is the second or third game in a series. It's not the first. Looking forward to get into it. I do like my FPS games. I think this is a first-person shooter, not a third-person shooter. I could be wrong on that. Alright, next up we got Bulletstorm, limited edition, whatever that entails. But this is another shooter for the PS3. Hopefully get into it eventually. Kind of a big backlog, as you can see. But I love my shooters, so I'll probably get around to it eventually. Then we got the Harry Potter Deathly Hallows. This is one I actually am very interested to crack open. I remember seeing this on an Angry Joe Show episode, if you know who that is. He basically makes like angry rant reviews about certain like terrible games that came out. And this is apparently, he described it as Call of Duty, but in Harry Potter, in terms of like the wand magic action combat. So I'm really interested to see just how bad this is. And I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, so even if it kind of vaguely follows the story and maybe gives a couple tidbits of new information, I'll be interested to at least see it through. Then we got Never Dead. This one I don't know much about. It looks like a shooter or a hack and slash game, if I'm not mistaken. Could be a combination of the two. But I've always loved the art style of this cover. Hopefully it's pretty good. I have no clue. I've heard it's I've heard mixed stuff about it, so eventually I'll see what it's all about. Then we got Heavenly Sword. One of the kind of original games that everybody started playing for the console. Apparently a pretty good hack and slash game. I'm on a little hack and slash kick, as I've said, so hopefully eventually get around to this. Then we got Wolfenstein, another first person shooter. I've played the one on the PS4, the first one of those ones. I really enjoyed that one, so I'm interested to see what the older ones have to offer. And I know this isn't like the older ones. I know there's ones on like the N64, the old computer games and stuff like that, kind of in the Doom era. This is one I'm looking to try out and see kind of what it's about. Alright, then we got the last game I'm currently playing through but have not finished yet, and that's Body Count. Body Count's actually pretty interesting. This is a first person shooter, and why I say it's interesting is that it kind of functions sound stylistically and kind of gameplay wise like a arcade shooter, where it has all these different sounds and power-ups you pick up off the ground. All the gun sounds and all that are crisp but very simple, and it kind of has that kind of arcadey gun sound, if you get what I'm saying. Like when you play those ones where you hold the gun and shoot, it very much functions like that. It has the cover mechanics as one of those games as well, so it's kind of like if just one of those games was ported onto the PS3. Was enjoying this game. I only got through like I think 2 stages or something like that, but I was enjoying the gunplay and the gameplay so far. I'd probably give it a 7. I'd say it's worth a playthrough. Alright, so next up we got the 2 ones that are most newest to the collection. That's probably the least grammatically correct way to say that, but you know what I mean. So I picked this up very recently. I know this is like a edgier, gorier game, and I think it's either a hack and slash or like a pseudo stealth game, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know too much about this game, but I like my horror games. I think it's going to fit the vibe of something like that, or like a really edgy hack and slash game, so I'm willing to give it a try. Alright, so then lastly, for the games I have not cracked open yet, this is White Knight Chronicles. I don't know too much about this. This is the International Edition. I think it just adds a little more content, but this was an RPG I've always saw in the store when I was younger and debated picking it up, but never really gave it a chance. I'm not the most educated person on RPGs for the PS3, I'm going to be honest, so I don't know too much about the game. Hoping it's decent. I'm always into finding a new RPG because you can really sink your teeth into them, so hopefully this is one I can do that for. Alright, the next up we have Mass Effect, one of my favorite gaming franchises of all time. Mass Effect 2 being probably my second favorite game of all time. First game, really good story and really good setup to the franchise. But the combat is a little wonky. It's very stiff and hasn't been like flushed out as well. So I'll give that game an 8. Mass Effect 2, one of the greatest games of all time. Perfect mix of great cover shooting mechanics, great squad-based combat, and an amazing story. So much depth in all of the character development that really makes that game perfect 10 out of 10 in my opinion. And then Mass Effect 3, kind of the opposite of 1. The story is pretty good actually up until literally the last like probably 35 minutes of playtime. Then it goes down the tubes and kind of, I wouldn't say ruins the trilogy, but it kind of ruins the ending to the story. And you know when you see a bad movie and the ending's bad, it kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. It's also an 8 though, I would say. Then next up we got Blur. I haven't actually put this one in. I had issues with it freezing on the menu, but since, as I said before, the bigs too, when you play it, if you play it offline, it won't freeze at the menu. I'm hoping to try this out in this game to see if it would work, because this game's actually pretty expensive now, and I was actually really interested to try it. Then we got Aliens Colonial Marines. It's an okay shooter. It's not great. If you're a big fan of the Aliens franchise, it might be interesting for you to play, but if you're not a big fan of it, I would probably stay clear of it. It'll basically be really easy, and they'll just run into walls and you'll sit there shooting them, and then all of a sudden you'll get insta-killed if someone gets close to you by accident. So not the greatest playing experience, but if you're really big into shooters or really big into aliens, it might be worth a try. I give it a 4. Then we got Anarchy Reigns. This is my perfect definition of a hidden gem. That's how I always describe this game. It's made by Platinum Games. For those of you who don't know, they make like the Bayonetta or Vanquish titles. And what they're known for is super flashy, super over-the-top action, hack and slash. And this game is really amazing, one of them. It has 2 branching stories, with the main 2 here. Really fun, different combat styles. Really worth picking it up if you can find it for cheap. I give it an 8 out of 10. Next up we have Aquapazza. This is a PlayStation exclusive fighting game. If you guys know BlazBlue or kind of Guilty Gear or Skullgirls, it kind of falls into that style where it's like a 2D anime fighting game. It was pretty solid. If you're looking for an arcade to play through or just to mess around in a fighting game, it might be worth a pickup if you can find it for cheap. I give it for 6. The combat was pretty fun. Alright, now we start the slew of Assassin's Creed games, starting with Assassin's Creed 2. Really good story. Really started to set the pace in terms of like giving Assassin's Creed more of a global audience. I'm not the biggest fan of Ezio. I find him can get kind of annoying, to be honest, but I can't deny how great this game is. I give it an 8. Next up we have Brotherhood, a solid little short single player campaign. It's one of the shorter ones in the series. What set this apart for me was the introduction of the multiplayer. I was really big into the multiplayer, and so just for that it gets a good score for me. I give it like a 7.8 in terms of if you were picking it up now. Revelations, kind of the opposite of Brotherhood. Pretty long story. I really like the mix-in of Altair. I found longer into the series, I actually grew to like Ezio more. He became a little less annoying in my opinion. But I like the tie-in with Altair. I really liked Altair. So this game's like a 7.8 for the opposite reason. The single player was really good. Then we got Assassin's Creed 3 finally. I thought Connor was kind of an interesting character. I liked the setting. The game was really slow off the start and seemed longer than needed for kind of the old school Assassin's Creed games. Still a fun game. I think a lot of the stuff was pretty refined for this game. I'd give it a 7.5 though. It's still solid if you're into the Assassin's Creed games. Then we got one of my favorite games of all time, Batman Arkham Asylum. In my opinion, I think it's the best Arkham game ever released. I really like the more linear style. I think this game really benefited from it by setting up a bunch of really cool, unique interactions that were kind of played through more like a movie, with you playing as Batman and setting it up like you would go from one character to one character to one character, and it was all really well paced and really well done. Really, really amazing game. If you haven't got into the series, highly recommend it, and make sure you start off with Arkham Asylum. This game's a 10 out of 10 in my opinion. Alright, then next up we have Arkham City, another really good game in the Arkham series. I don't like this one as much. I thought the story was really good. I just not a big fan of the open world. I prefer the more linear style of Asylum. I just think it fits these style of games better. I give it an 8.5. Then next up we got Arkham Origins. The weakest out of the 3 in my opinion. I haven't played any of the newer ones. I think there's 2 I'm missing, or 1. I can't remember. Any of the ones past the PS3 I haven't played yet. This game was okay. I thought the enemy or villain interactions weren't as interesting in my opinion. Still, the atmosphere, story, and all that, it's really well done. But it's just my least favorite out of the 3. I give it a 7.5 though, still a really solid game. Then we have Battlefield Bad Company. I know, don't roast me too much for the stickers. You'll see that a lot throughout this video. I'm really lazy with that. I have now purchased the I think I have the putty, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere. The one that takes off all the goo. So hopefully I'll do that one day. I've just never gotten around to it yet. My main thing's the labels. If they don't have anything, I'm pretty cool with that. So anyways, back to it. Battlefield Bad Company. I honestly didn't think these games were that good story-wise going into it, but after playing through it, I really ended up liking the story. I thought a lot of the squad mates were really likable, and it actually has a pretty cohesive and well-told story throughout it. So I was really surprised with this one. I give it a 7.9. All right, then we have Battlefield Bad Company 2. Basically the exact same as saying about the first one. Really interesting story. I like the characters. I did play the online for this one a bit. I got it very late, so I was joining into like people who knew the game inside and out, so it wasn't too interesting for me, but I can see why people played it and enjoyed it a lot. I give this game probably an 8, like literally a smidge better than the first one. I think the combat and stuff is a lot more refined in the game. Then we got Battlefield 3. This is a solid first-person shooter. I got this one really late, so I only played through the campaign. It was okay, very generic. I honestly don't remember too much about it. That's how generic it was. It was kind of like those, those Call of Duty games where it's kind of, you play the campaign and it kind of all blends together. That's how I describe this game. The shooting and combat in these games are always great anyway, so if you just want to pick it up for the single player, it's worth it anyways, because they're really cheap. I give it a 7.5. Alright, then there's Bayonetta, one of my favorite franchises of all time, and really what started my current kick and current love of hack and slash and beat 'em up games. I wasn't really into them, so I played Bayonetta. Really great story, really great action, probably one of the more likable cast of characters I've had in a video game. The combat is a little more refined in 2, so I'd give it a 9. Then next up, we got Beyond Two Souls. I enjoyed this game. I enjoyed Heavy Rain a little bit more. I thought the beginning was very slow, and then it picked up really well in the later half, and then towards the end it got really interesting. So I'd give it a 7.5. These types of more story, full-on story, not a lot of like playing games, are really hard for me to get into completely, but I ended up finishing it, so it was solid. Then we got The Bigs 2. Big warning if anybody picks this up. Make sure if you play it with your console set to offline. So make it so you're signed out of the online service and then launch the game. If you launch the game while you're online, it will freeze. But if not, you'll be able to play it perfectly. That being said, this is an amazing arcade sports games. For those of you who watch the channel all the time, I say this all the time, I love arcade sports games, and this one was fantastic. This is one from my early childhood. Definitely recommend it. I'd probably give it an 8. Then we got the BioShock games. First one's my favorite out of the series. Just Rapture and the darkness and grittiness of this game is fantastic. It's kind of a pseudo horror, or it's a first-person shooter and a horror game. The first-person shooter makes it a little less horror-y because you can just blast everybody with a shotgun. But I really like the mix of the power mechanics and the weapons. There's a lot of play diversity and build diversity, which is great, so it leads to a little bit of replayability. And Rapture is just so interesting to explore. I'd give this game a 9. Then we got BioShock 2. Really equally as interesting in terms of the atmosphere, the cast of characters you run into, the enemies, and exploring Rapture, all still nailed really well in this game. I just think playing as the Big Daddy takes a little bit of that horror element out of the games a bit, because you're like this big walking tank, so it's a little not as scary, but I'd still give it an 8.5. Then we got BioShock Infinite. Really different approach. Probably the best game in terms of the power mechanics and the actual first-person shooting. They definitely improved it, and it feels the most fluid in this game. They went for kind of a lighter tones early on, and with the actual colors and environment, but has that undertone kind of dark and grittiness that you're kind of finding out, which is really interesting to play through. And the ending to this and both one are fantastic and really mind-bendy. So I give this one an 8.7. I think it's just under 1 in terms of quality, but still an amazing game. Then we got BlazBlue. This is my preferred fighting game series, just if anybody was wondering for some reason. Really enjoy this series. I think the cast of characters and the playstyle variants and how each character plays is so different and unique. The art style in this game is fantastic, usually with some banger music. Really long story campaign. I usually play these for the arcades. I love their arcade mode. It's really fun. And they have an abyss mode where you can level up a character and give them different stats and go through this giant kind of dungeon mode. Really enjoy these games. I give this game an 8. Then next up, we got Blitz League 2. If any of you watched my Hidden Gems videos, this was, I think, in the second one. It's in the second or first one. There's only 2 of them, but I think it was in the second one. Really, really, really amazing arcadey football game. For those of you who are not into mature content, definitely don't pick this up. It's all over the edge. It has a bunch of edge in it. You can get like drugs, you can get better steroids, you can get better equipment and stuff like that. But if you can get past that, or if you enjoy that, behind it there's an amazing campaign mode, tons of replayability in terms of making your character into a bunch of different play styles and a bunch of different positions. Really in-depth kind of RPG mechanics in it. Really, really, really recommend this if you're into football games at all. Highly recommend it. I give it an 8.5. All right, then we got Borderlands. I always switch between 1 and 2 of which one I like more. It kind of flips day by day. These are really quality first-person shooters, really good RPG mechanics, and the looting's fantastic in this game. Always kind of the big selling point of these games. The one thing I really like about this game is I like the cast of characters in terms of who you play as the best in this game, and I really like the proficiency. So you level up your gun proficiency by using specific ones. So I felt it gives a little more replayability and build diversity. Like you can't just be a jack of all trades. So I'd give this one an 8. Then we got Borderlands 2. Recently I've been leaning to this one as the better out of the 2. But both of them are fantastic. I highly recommend getting the first one, then picking this one up if you haven't played either of them. I just think the story in this one is a lot better than the first one. Handsome Jack is one of the most entertaining and interesting bad guys in a video game I've played. So for that, it gets an 8.5. Then we got Borderlands, the pre-sequel. I really like the characters and the builds you could go for in this game. I played as the girl that could actually dual wield pistols or whatever. The story was okay. I think it's definitely the most lackluster of them. I really like the side quests in these games though. I think that's what brought it up a bit for me. So I'd give it a 7.8. Still a solid game for sure. Then next up we have Brink. I actually got this game when it first came out, and I was really big into the multiplayer. If you get it now, it's basically just a very short campaign, which is basically playing the multiplayer missions, but with bots on both sides. It's still fun. I like the combat in the game generally. Just the story in that is not that interesting because it was made in mind to be a multiplayer game first. So I'd give it a 5. Then next up, we have Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway. This one's a really unique one. If I'm remembering this is the right game, I'm pretty sure it is. It's a first-person shooter or third-person shooter that you swap between, like giving tactical commands, kind of like an RTS, so to say, and then you can switch to being actual one of the units and going around fighting like a third person or first person shooter. I'm pretty sure this is how this game functions. If it's the game I'm remembering, a very unique, interesting game. I never got through it. I think something came out that took me away from it, but I remember it being one of the more unique games I've played on the console, and actually it being pretty good. So I give it a 7.5. Then we got Burnout Paradise. Really great game. If you're into racing games at all, highly recommend picking it up if you've never played this. Continues the Bird Out franchise of smashing, super fast, arcadey racing, great music, and I actually enjoy the open world in this one. I think Paradise is really interesting to explore all the different stunt modes, the different unique spots where you can go and collect all the different car skins and stuff like that. And I really like the addition of, to unlock cars, you would drive through the city, they would kind of pull up beside you and you would have to like take them down and chase them in order to unlock them. I really enjoyed that part of the game. I give it an 8.5, really, really solid racer. Alright, so now we start the plethora of Call of Duty games. Black Ops 1, probably some of my fondest memories of Call of Duty. This was back when I was a pure COD kid and all I played was Call of Duty. I remember staying up one summer when this game was out, and the current one, literally every day played till like 4 a.m. From like 12 to like 4 a.m. Just grinding Call of Duty with a group of guys I played with. Really awesome multiplayer, good zombies, and the single player is okay. It gets a little weird. Not my favorite Call of Duty campaign, but still solid. I give it an 8. Then we got Call of Duty Black Ops 2. I did not play this when it came out. Modern Warfare 3 got me off Call of Duty, so I stopped being a COD kid after that. But I do pick them up later once they're a little cheaper because I do enjoy playing the campaigns. This was one of those kind of forgettable campaigns that I know is solid. I just don't remember what happens because they all blend together, as I said. I give it a 7. Then we got Black Ops 3. This game only comes with the multiplayer and zombies. As you can see, it's still sealed. I'm pretty sure there was a campaign for this game. I think I have it on the PS4 if I'm not mistaken. But this is when I was trying to figure out if I was going to go for 100% on the PS3 in terms of collecting the games. So it was only $2, so I bought it. It's a 2 because you can't really do much with it now. Then we have Call of Duty Ghosts, another one I did not play the multiplayer of. And the campaign, I liked the premise of the game. I thought it was pretty interesting. I liked the more reliance on stealth for certain parts. It was kind of just a middle of the road Call of Duty campaign, so I give it a 6.5. It was still a fun playthrough. Then we have Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, probably one of the better campaigns Call of Duty has ever put out. The game that got me into Call of Duty personally. I didn't play the multiplayer a ton, but what I did, I enjoyed it. I'd probably give this game an 8 alone for the campaign. Then we have Modern Warfare 2, probably my favorite Call of Duty of all time. This was back again when I was a peak Call of Duty kid. I was quickscoping, riot shield, square, C4 cheesing, going for all the montage stuff that you would see online at this time. This era of Call of Duty was insane. Call of Duty was everywhere. All the online presence was surrounding Call of Duty. This was probably one of the greatest times for me as a gamer in terms of multiplayer. I give this game an 8.5, really solid campaign as well. Then we have Modern Warfare 3. This game got me off Call of Duty. I hated the multiplayer, and the campaign was kind of just boring. It was super forgettable, so I give it a 3. Then we got Call of Juarez Bound in Blood. This is a pretty decent cowboy shooter. I don't know if there's any other ones that were originally on like the PS2 or something, but I really enjoyed this one. The story was pretty decent. 2 pretty unique play styles. You can play as either of the brothers throughout the campaign, and they have their own unique guns that they use and abilities, so there is a little bit of replayability in this game. I think you can also play multiplayer with somebody. I don't know if it's split screen though. Really solid first-person shooter. If you're a first-person shooter fan and haven't picked this up, I'd recommend it. Give it a 7.5. Then we have Call of Juarez The Cartel. Same game franchise as the last one, if you can believe it. They brought it to the modern era, and you're like cops that are busting a cartel, and you're like this super special agent squad. It's the same thing. There's a couple different characters that you can play through that have their own play styles. Not as good. The story's kind of not great, and the characters are definitely not as compelling. So I'd give it a 5. I would get it only if you're a first-person shooter fan and just want to play through a new first-person shooter. It's worth a playthrough, I would say. Then we got Command & Conquer Red Alert 3. I'm a big RTS fan. This is a fantastic game. So much content, so much replayability. All 3 factions in this RTS have really unique play styles, and playing the different campaigns is a lot of fun. If you're into RTSs at all and haven't played this game, I would highly recommend it. I'd give it an 8.5. Alright, then we have Crysis 3. Pretty good first-person shooter. I like the unique stealth elements of the suit, and this is one game that you can actually play a bunch of different ways. I ended up cheesing a lot of this game by going stealth and just abusing the invisibility to get through levels. Really pretty game, pretty solid game. I give it a 7. Then we got Damnation. If you watched my worst PS3 games of all time, this was on the list. It's basically like Uncharted, but a lot of stuff went wrong. The combat is really stiff. There's no feedback on any of the guns. It's a third-person shooter. The sounds in this game are horrendous, and the story is kind of interesting at certain parts. I think that's why I ended up getting through it. And the kind of driving around can be fun at times. But the combat and the sound design in this game is really bad, and the FPS lags a lot in this game. So I'd give it a 3. Then we have Dark Souls. I've never busted this open. Will at some point, maybe. I always say this every time I update this video. How I describe it is, I never have gotten the urge to play a game that's generally made to piss me off, because I know it will be hard and I know it will piss me off. I usually save my really hard games for like stealth games or fighting games or RTSs. Those are the games that I can ramp up my difficulty on. The rest of them I kind of just play on normal or slightly hard or something like that. So maybe I'll get around to it one day. Then next up we have Darkness. This is the first out of a series of 2 games on the PS3. I think they're also on the 360 if I'm not mistaken. Really recommend getting these games if you're into first-person shooters at all, or enjoy a pretty good story, like a darker, edgier story. You play as, I totally forget his name, but he's like a son of a famous mob boss, and I'm pretty sure somebody betrays him and then tries to kill him, and then he makes a pact with a demon of sorts. These are all like the creatures around him, and basically you can summon them as powers to use in the game, and you can use the darkness to like heal. You can knock out light to like disorient people. You can see in the dark. You can use them to feed on like their hearts to gain life essence and XP and stuff like that. And a really worthwhile playthrough. I'd highly recommend getting into this series if you haven't. I give it an 8. Then we have the Darkness 2. Basically everything I say about the first game in terms of the powers, the edginess, the story, and what they did in this game is really enhanced the combat feel and the powers mechanics. So it's basically the first game but slightly better. So I'd give it an 8.5. Then we have Dead Island. It's an okay zombies game. It's one of the first ones that I played in terms of that was a zombies game. The combat is decent. It's a little janky and clunky at times. Definitely still a solid game, so I'd give it a 6. Alright, then we got Dead to Rights Retribution. This is a pretty unique game. I've never heard of it until I picked it up last year. I actually really ended up enjoying the game. It's a third-person shooter mixed with kind of a beat-em-up game. You play as basically a over-the-top like superhero cop that's kind of gone rogue a bit. Cover shoot mechanics of a third-person shooter mixed with you can choose to and basically just walk up to people and beat the ever-loving crap out of them. It is very gory and very over-the-top violent, and there's stealth mechanics sections with the dog as well. I would actually recommend giving it a try. I'd probably give it a 7.2, we'll say. It's a pretty solid game. Then we got another one I played through this year, which is Deadpool. I ended up enjoying this game decently. The combat mechanic, it's like a hack and slash beat 'em up game. Very over the top, very fast paced, pretty flashy. What this game does really well is it nails the character of Deadpool. Deadpool himself in this game really carry this game. Because the story is kind of meh, and the enemy variety and map layout itself and stage design is not the best. So if you're into beat 'em up games or hack and slash games, I'd recommend it. Or if you enjoy Deadpool as a character, I would recommend it just to play through and listen to Deadpool. I think they nail the character really well. But the level design and combat is a little dull, so I'd give it like a 6.5 or something like that. Then we got Deus Ex Human Revolution. I really enjoy this game. One of the, I would say, coolest main characters I've played through. I'm pretty sure his name was Adam Jensen, if I'm not mistaken. I could be completely wrong on that. What's great about these games is it's a stealth first-person shooter that you can really choose how to play based off of your playstyle. A ton of replayability in this game, and the story is really well done. So I'd give this game an 8.6. Then we got Dishonored. Really unique stealth game. I like the power mechanics it has in this game. You can kind of blink around. There's a bunch of different versions of the abilities. I just haven't played it in a while, so I'm not too refreshed on it. The story was pretty interesting. I like the environment of the game. I give it an 8.3. Then we have Dragon Age Origins, one of my favorite games of all time. Amazing, amazing story. Some of the best characters in an RPG I've played. I love the interactions between all the characters as you go into different areas. The RPG mechanics are really well done in this game. It's the same kind of combat style as Knights of the Old Republic if you played those games. I give this game a 9.2. I really enjoy this game. Then we have Dragon Age Origins Awakening. This is basically just disc-based DLC expansion. It was pretty decent, just more of kind of the same. I would say a little less interesting plot points, but it's really cool. You can bring your character into this, so that was awesome to play through. I give it an 8.5. It's solid. Then we have Dragon Age 2. I know this one, there's a lot of people that hate on this game. I actually really enjoyed it. I really liked the game. I think the characters and story was still really well done. I actually really like the change in combat. I nothing against Origins. I love the combat in that game, but I also love the combat in this game. I think it's more fast and fluent, more action based. I think the characters are still really well done in this game. I give it a 9. Then we got Dragon's Dogma. This game, really good. I enjoyed it. The combat's really well done, and I like the kind of companion system with the people you can summon. I think I dropped this game partially because something came out, and partially because I got tired of not having the fast travel. So I give it a 7. Duke Nukem Forever is up next. Another game a lot of people like to hate, but I actually kind of like. I don't think it's an amazing shooter or amazing game by any stance, but I think it's solid. I think there's some good jokes in the game. I think the combat is really well done, and I think the level design and boss fights are pretty interesting, and the variety of guns is really well done. I did actually play the multiplayer a little bit when it came out. I give the game a 6. Then we have Dynasty Warriors Strike Force. I wasn't really a big fan of this game. A lot of the Dynasty Warrior games, I could not get into their story at all. This was one of them. I wasn't really interested in this one at all. I give it a 4. Right, then we have Oblivion. Fantastic RPG by Bethesda. Has some of the greatest quest lines in my opinion. The Dark Brotherhood quest line in this is probably my favorite out of any of the Bethesda games I've played. Such a unique quest line, and the one where you're killing all the people in the house and it's like a murder mystery, that was one of my favorite quests of all time. I give this game an 8.7. Alright, then we have Skyrim Elder Scrolls. Enjoyed this game a lot. This is the game that got me into RPGs at all. I was a COD kid before this game, bought this game when it came out roughly. I saved up a bunch of money from, it was either birthdays, paper route, like a bunch of stuff combined, and I walked into the game store. At that time it was an EB Games, and it was a new game that came out, and everybody was talking about it, and there was this huge display, and I talked to the cashier guy, and I was like, is this game worth getting? And he's like, yeah, this is going to be one of the best games you'll ever play. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. I got home, he was completely right. I enjoyed the crap out of it. But this specifically PS3 edition original copy of Skyrim, I'm giving this a 4 because this game eventually got so buggy that every time I touched water in the game, my entire console would hard freeze. So this version gets a 4. Alright, then we have Elder Scrolls Skyrim, the Legendary Edition. Basically added a bunch of new DLC, which was amazing to play through. I really liked the house building and the vampire storyline. New companions, fixed all the buggy issues that I have, so I can give my true Skyrim rating of this one as a 9.4. One of my favorite games of all time. Then we got Enemy Front. This is a pretty unique first-person shooter in terms of story that I've played, and I played this one this year. It's basically you play as a photographer in, I think it's World War II if I'm not mistaken, and then basically you end up being dragged into helping the war and becoming a soldier on the front line. It's very over the top and kind of movie unrealistic version of what it would happen realistically. I don't know, it could be based off of a true story, I'm not 100%, but it seems very movie-like. The combat was okay. It was a little framey at times, but it was kind of a pseudo open world linear style where you can kind of pick and choose what fights to engage in. So it was kind of interesting in that regards. I give it a 7. It was solid. Then we have Fairy Tale Fights. This one last time on a previous update video, I said I thought it didn't have a single player game playthrough, so I didn't play it, but apparently it does, so I'm willing to give it a try. I haven't played it yet, so I can't rate it. Then we have Far Cry 3, one of the more unique and interesting bad guys, and I think his name is Voss, if I'm not mistaken. One of the better Far Cry games in my opinion. Those who don't know, Far Cry, first person shooter with some survival mechanics in terms of like crafting and upgrading your gear, with some really cool, unique characters that you run into. Usually you can have them as companions, or you can have animals as companions, and they all provide different traits, a lot of different guns, a lot of different upgrades, and a pretty good story. Definitely recommend it if you haven't got into it. I give it an 8. Then we have Fallout 3, really good RPG, good first person shooter mechanics, some pretty interesting storylines in this one. I didn't find it as good as New Vegas, but I really enjoy this game's and New Vegas's RPG systems over Fallout 4's ones. So I give this game an 8.6, a really good game. Then we have New Vegas, in my opinion, the best Fallout game of all time. I haven't played the top-down ones. I'm not really interested in top-down games. It's just, for some reason, never been a, viewpoint or view style that's gotten too much interest out of me, unless it's in the RTS genre. This game's fantastic. Basically, everything I said about Fallout 3 in terms of the amazing RPG elements, a lot of different build variety, really cool weapons, but basically they improved the combat. The location, in my opinion, is a lot more interesting, and the storylines and side characters and side factions and the amount of different ways you can end the game is so unique and so cool. I've always enjoyed this game. I'd give this game a 9. Then we have Fear 2, pretty average shooter, I'd say. FPS, has horror elements with kind of a mix of this little girl that's haunting you as the main character, and most of the time spent is killing just like regular humans that are from an organization. So that part's kind of disappointing. I'd give it a 5. It's solid for a playthrough, I'd say. Then we have Fear 3. Again, basically follows the same thing. I'd say the combat is slightly better in this game, but the story is a good bit worse. This is one of those games where it deviates too much from the original premise. There's not as much of the horror elements, and you're basically just playing a Call of Duty campaign in this one. I'd give it a 5. Then we have the God of War Collection 1 and 2. Everybody's going to hate me for this. I couldn't get into them. I don't know what it was. This was before I got into my hack and slash kick, so maybe that recently I've been more into hack and slashes, I might be able to get into it. Just when I played it, it wasn't for me. I'd give it a 5 for me personally, but I know they're really well made games. That's why I'm not giving it a lower grade. Next up, we got the Godfather Dawn Edition. This game's actually pretty expensive now to get, so if you luckily run into it, definitely pick it up. It's a decent game. It's kind of like a Mafia, Grand Theft Auto type of vibe. It follows kind of the Rockstar formula in terms of how the quest and story is kind of told. It's pretty decent. I didn't get all the way through it, but I remember it not being too bad, and the story was actually pretty decent. I give it a 7. Then we got Grand Theft Auto, Episodes from Liberty City. Pretty good. This is another thing people hate me for. I'm not the biggest Grand Theft Auto fan. I find this one, I found the story a little boring, but overall, like, the open world elements, the combat, the quests are pretty good in this game. I never got to the DLC. I think I finished the majority of the story. I give it a 7. Not my personal cup of tea. Is like an amazing game, but it's still a solid game. Then we got Haze, the supposed Halo killer. That's what they branded this with when it came out. Definitely did not live up to that. Basically a very bare bones, kind of clunky first person shooter with a okay story, with some really stupid one-liners which are kind of funny. I'd give it a 4. It's not horrendous, but with the hype and how the game came out, it definitely doesn't deserve a good grade. Then we got Heavy Rain, probably one of my favorite, I guess these are like, I don't know, kind of like a point and click game, point and click adventure game. I really enjoyed the story. It's like a serial killer whodunit type thing. Twists in it are pretty good. The main character and kind of the main four you interact with are all really interesting, and it all ties together really well at the end. If you haven't given it a shot, I'd recommend it. I give it an 8. Then we got Hitman Absolution. This is one I played last year. Really actually enjoyed it. Definitely the kind of darker, I guess more self-shaded kind of look they went for in this game is pretty decent. Still has some really intricate, bigger levels, kind of like the newer Hitmans. And then what this game does well is it breaks up the regular missions with missions that are more gimmicky. Like there's one where you can win like a shooting contest to get the objective that you were trying to get, and then it just ends the level. So there's more fun and unique ways to end levels in this game than I found in the other Hitmans I've played. I'd probably give it like a 7.5. It was pretty solid. Then we got Homefront. Really recommend this game if you're into FPSs. This is one I think is kind of a hidden gem on the console. I think this one got overlooked because the multiplayer was just kind of okay, and it was kind of a clone of kind of Battlefield and MAG, if anybody of you know MAG. But the single player campaign I actually highly recommend playing through. Story's pretty interesting. The whole concept of the North Korea and South Korea coming together and then evading the US, pretty interesting. I actually enjoyed the campaign a lot. I give it probably a 7.5. Really solid FPS if you're just looking for a campaign playthrough. Next up, we got Hot Shots Out of Bounds. Big fan on the Hot Shots series. If you watch the channel at all, you'll know I'm a huge fan. And this is a pretty solid one. I don't think I got all the way through. I think I got about 3/4 of the way through. Really solid. Courses are pretty good. It's one of those games where it has kind of the more unique, stylized characters, which I like. Kind of like the originals. Always recommend these games if you're interested in trying out the genre. I give it an 8. Then we got Infamous. In my opinion, probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, exclusive series on the PS3. I think these games are fantastic, and I really wish going forward in the future they actually release a new one for the PS5. But this one's pretty solid. Definitely a little more clunky and a little more annoying game mechanics. Especially like doing the sewers to unlock like the power plants or something like that. That was really annoying. I give this one a 7. Definitely a good start to the series, but it really improved after this. And here's Infamous 2. Basically everything I said about the first game, they took out the annoying aspects of like the sewer systems and all the annoying collectibles and mechanics you had to go through and repeat throughout the game. Combat was not revamped, but cleaned up and definitely made more fluent. Story was a lot more interesting, and I really enjoyed this one a lot more in terms of the choices. I thought they were a little more unique. I replayed this one, got the platinum, really enjoyed this game. I'd probably give it an 8.5. Injustice, Gods Among Us, really fun fighting game. If you guys like the Mortal Kombat series, it's made by the same creators, and NetherRealms is really known for their storytelling in their campaigns of their fighting games and having really fleshed out story modes. So if you are even interested in the kind of story that they're going for with the superheroes and stuff like that, I recommend just picking it up, playing it on an easy mode or medium, and just playing through the campaign. It's really fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. I'd probably give this game an 8. I actually really enjoyed the combat in this game as well. Then we got Inversion. Pretty unique game. It's basically I don't want to say Gears of War clone, but follows the Gears of War third-person shooter kind of cover mechanics. And what they kind of go for in this one is basically you can constantly change the gravity, kind of like whoop, whoop, and you can change kind of how the battle is being fought. And it's kind of the gimmicky mechanic of the game. It works pretty well. The combat is definitely not as fleshed out as a Gears of War game. It's solid, definitely good for a playthrough. I'd probably give it a 7. It was a fun game. I enjoyed the inversion mechanics. Just the combat, it's a little stiff, I find. Then we got the Jak and Daxter trilogy. I actually never played this trilogy until I picked up this collection. The first game's amazing. I love the first game. I love the kind of cheery, old school platformy kind of vibe it goes for, and I found the stories like cute and fun, and Jak and Daxter are really likable and funny. Really enjoy and recommend that one. I'd probably give that one an 8.3. 2 and 3, it's too edgy. There's a lot of... I just don't find Jak and Daxter as interesting in those two, and they add a lot of timer mechanics to those ones, so it kind of rushes you. I would give those two a 6. They're just not really my style, but the first one's fantastic. Then we got Clive Baker's Jericho. This is like a horror FPS, if I'm not mistaken. It's either an FPS or a third-person shooter. It is in the horror genre. It's an interesting concept. It's like a horror squad-based shooter. I couldn't get into it too much. I didn't really like the combat in the game. But I think if you can get past that and you kind of like the art style and look of the game, you could definitely get into it. I give it a 4 for myself personally. But I think if you're interested in, it's worth picking it up and trying it out. I'm pretty sure it's really cheap. Then we get to one of the best series on the PlayStation 3, is Killzone. Killzone 2, fantastic story. Love the weighty gun combat in this game. Really amazing FPS, super interesting story, awesome multiplayer when it was active. Give this game an 8.5. Then we got Killzone 3. Really improved on the combat. It feels a lot smoother and more kind of put together, I would say, in this one. The story's not as interesting as 2 in my opinion, but it's still good. Campaign's I think a little shorter than 2 as well. Multiplayer was fantastic though. I'd probably give this one an 8, like 8.6, like a tick higher than 2, just because the combat was a lot more refined in this. But they're both really solid games. We got the King of Fighters 7, pretty decent fighting game. I accidentally bought this one instead of the newest one when it was active. So I basically wanted to try to get into the multiplayer of this game, and it was completely dead because the new game was already out by then. So I just played a little bit of the arcade. Very solid, well put together fighting series. This is the only one I ever bought, and my mistake kind of turned me off of buying a new one. But maybe I'll pick up one of the newer ones if one ever drops. Pretty solid game. I give it a 7. Then next up we got Kingdom of Amalur Reckoning. Really underrated RPG for the console. I feel like not enough people talk about this game. It got a remaster, so if you can't get it for the PS3, you can also pick it up for, I think, the PS4 and 5, if I'm not mistaken. Really great game, action RPG. Pretty okay story. It just kind of keeps the combat moving, but the combat in this game is fantastic. So much class variation, and there's a lot of quests and stuff to explore in this game. Really recommend picking this up if you're into RPGs at all. I'd probably give it an 8.1. Then we got LA Noire, the one game for some reason I have never been able to finish. I've tried restarting this game like 3 to 4 times. It's an amazing game, really interesting story. I like the kind of solving the murders and facial detection and stuff like that. It's really cool. For some reason, I just always ended up dropping this game. I don't know why. It's a great game though. I give it an 8. Then we got Lollipop Chainsaw. If you watch my hidden gems, I highly recommend this game. Really just fun, over the top, and just always a blast to pick up and play. Pretty short is, I would say, one thing that's a negative about it, but the quality of the content makes up for it. Really well paced, pretty good jokes, a lot of different variation to the combat and abilities in this game. Highly recommend if you can pick it up. It's getting more expensive, so it's kind of a hard one to pick up. I give it an 8. Then we got Lord of the Rings Conquest, another one of my recommended hidden gems. Made by the same studio, Pandemic, that made Battlefront. It's basically Lord of the Rings Battlefront. Really fun campaign playthrough, and you can always pick it up, kind of like in Battlefront, where you can just play the instant action and play against bots. Super fun. Not as good as Battlefront because there's the combat's a little stiff, but the melee combat's a lot of fun as an addition to these types of games. Highly recommend it. I'd probably put it as an 8. Based off the fact that it's a quality game, and I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, so it kind of hits that niche for me as well. Then we got Madden 11, the only Madden game I own for the console. I kind of get the itch to play them occasionally. This I remember being a solid one. I give it a 7. Then we got Max Payne 3, a pretty interesting game. The story was decent. I think Max is a pretty interesting character. Kind of lives on that like edge of being kind of a good guy, bad guy type thing, like an anti-hero. The slow down gun mechanics are really fun in these games, as always. I give it a 7.5. Medal of Honor Airborne, another one of my hidden gem recommendations. Really fun shooter, probably the last one in the Medal of Honor series that really captures the old school vibe of the older games. A lot more gritty, a lot more, and focus on more of the dark subject matter of the World Wars in an interesting way. If you're into first person shooters at all, or enjoyed the Medal of Honor games in the past, I'd recommend this one. And the airborne mechanics are pretty interesting in terms of like choosing where to attack from and what order to do objectives. It kind of gives a little more flavor to it. I'd give it a 7.5. Then we got Medal of Honor. This is the first of the Battlefield clone versions. Basically, the multiplayer is basically carbon copy of Battlefield. The campaign in this one's actually pretty good. I actually recommend, if you're an FPS fan, picking this up just to play the campaign. I thought it was pretty solid. If you like the campaign of like Call of Duty or Battlefield games, this will definitely fit your itch for one of those if you need one to pick up. As I said before, the multiplayer was just Battlefield, so I won't give this too high of a rating. I'd give it just a 7. We got Medal of Honor Warfighter, the game that basically killed the Medal of Honor franchise. They basically handed it off to, instead of dice, it was Danger Close, and they kind of, I don't know, changed the formula up a bit. And I honestly think that Medal of Honor needs to go back to focusing on the World Wars and more being a campaign-driven experience that has multiplayer, but it's more about the campaign and the storytelling and kind of the more dark and gritty and realistic view of the war. I think that's what they strive on. I would give this one a 6. It's okay. Then we got Mercenaries 2 World in Flames. It's basically like an open world third-person shooter where you play as this mercenary company trying to fulfill contracts to gain money, and you basically get tied up in a bunch of stuff, and then the campaign kind of carries on. I didn't get too far into it. I think something just came out that I dropped it partway through. It was pretty solid for what I remember. I give it a 7. Then we got Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriot, Tactical Espionage Action. I don't know, I feel like I had to do the full title there. Really amazing game. If you haven't played any of the Metal Gear games, this is the one I'd recommend the most. It's the one that really has caught my attention and kind of gripped me all the way through. For those of you who don't know what these games are, they're stealth games and kind of shooters as well. You can play them as a shooter, I guess, kind of. But they're really story driven and they have a fantastic way of telling them. If you haven't got into these franchise, I recommend even just picking up 4 by itself if you have a PS3. I really recommend this game. Probably give it an 8.5. Then we got Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. I probably have to retry playing through this. And now that I'm on my kind of hack and slash kick, I remember this one being pretty solid, even when I wasn't into them too much. Really flashy, really over the top hack and slash game. Raiden's pretty badass in this game. A lot of really high combos, really fast pace. If you're into that type of game, this is definitely one to look out for. If you see it, I'd give it a 7.6. Then we got Midnight Club Los Angeles. This is a Rockstar racing game, basically a racing RPG. You're basically working your way up through the underground racing scene, buying new cars, upgrading your kind of gear in cars to take on better races, beating rivals, doing pink slips for cars, all that type of stuff. Pretty fun game. Driving's pretty good. I give it an 8. Then we got MX vs ATV Reflex. I was never really into these games. I tried picking up one. I think I paid like $16 for this or something like that to try to get into one. Just not my cup of tea personally. It's a solid racing game, and if you're into these type of motocross games, I would recommend picking up and getting into the series. I give it a 7. It's just not my personal preference when it comes to racers. Then we got NBA Ballers Chosen One. Not a fan of this game. The basketball mechanics are okay. It's like a street basketball game. One thing this game does horribly is the camera angles. The camera angles in this game are horrendous, and I just think compared to the original one on the PS2, it's just a downgrade in every faction, in my opinion. And I think the only thing that's great about this one is that they add a campaign to it. Even the second one on the PS2 had a campaign as well. I'd probably give this game a 3. I'm just not a fan of it, and it kind of ruined one of my favorite franchises. Then we got NBA 09 The Inside. Pretty basic NBA game, but it's nice because it's not a 2K game, so at least it's some variety and it plays a little different. So kind of fun to go back to occasionally. And if you're into basketball games at all, it's definitely a mix-up from the 2K games or the live games that you're used to. I give it a 5. It was okay. Then we got NHL 12. Really enjoyed this hockey game. Probably my favorite NHL game of all time. That right mix of simulation in terms of the stick movement and controlling your shots, but still the more arcadey and unrealistic checking and skating, and just to make it a little more fun for people like me who don't really care about the simulation aspects. And all the modes and features that you would want in an NHL game are in this game. I give it an 8. I really enjoy this one. Then we got NPPL Championship Paintball 2009. So basically, there was a paintball game I remember playing when I was a kid. I think it was on the Xbox, like original Xbox, and it had these cool open forest maps and was pretty fun to just mess around in. I picked up this one thinking it would be similar. Basically, this is a first-person shooter paintball game that has a little campaign mode. The campaign mode basically comes down to cheesing and just running back and forth because the AI can't hit you, and you just basically insta clear every single thing once you get your attributes up, and you get them up really quick. It's kind of boring too because you can only play the basic paintball maps. There's no really like outdoor or big maps or forest maps or anything like that. I give it a 3. It's not that great. Then we got Persona 4 Arena. If you are a Persona 4 fan or a fighting game fan, highly recommend picking this up. Really cool addition to the Persona 4 story. I'm a huge Persona 4 fan, so being able to pick this up, 1, for the story, fantastic. 2, it's very similar to BlazBlue in terms of combat, and I'm a big BlazBlue fan, so basically a combination of two things I really enjoy. The arcade and story is really fun to play through as each character and get their different perspectives. The other characters they add, like the girl on the right here, are very interesting as well and add to the story pretty well. And it just has all the music, the art style and all that catches that similar tone the Persona 4 original game went for. So I really love this game. I give it an 8.5. Then next up we have Persona 4 Arena Ultimax. This is just a sequel to the Persona 4 Arena fighting game. Added a bunch of new characters. Story was, I wouldn't say as good, but solid. Combat is still fantastic. Basically all the characters that were in the original Persona 4 fighting game, they basically copy and paste their fighting styles into this one, which is fine, because they added a decent bit of new characters and a new bad guy, new story, new arcade. So definitely worth a pickup if you enjoyed the first one. Still definitely recommend getting into this series, especially if you're a Persona fan at all. I'd probably give this one an 8. Then next up we got PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. This was a pretty unique one. It was basically PlayStation's version of Smash Bros. It wasn't obviously as good as Smash Bros, but I thought it was actually pretty fun, especially because the arcade in this mode was fantastic. Each character had their own unique set of fights. All the playstyles are pretty unique in terms of the characters. They had their own ending, like boss character or matchup that they had with another fighter from the game. They all had their own endings, which I really enjoyed. I'd recommend picking it up. I give it a 7.5. Alright, then we got Rage. This was actually a pretty solid first-person shooter RPG for the console. It's made by the same people, I think, that made the Doom games, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check that. Yeah, from the makers of Doom and Quake. So the gunplay was really good in this game. I remember it being pretty gory and dark in terms of the atmosphere and stuff like that. I remember having a lot of fun with this game, and I'm pretty sure there's racing mechanics, which I enjoyed as well. I give it an 8. Then we got Red Dead Redemption. In my opinion, Rockstar's second best game ever. Definitely one of the best games of this console generation. Amazing story, follows the typical Rockstar formula in terms of gameplay that everybody knows and loves. In my opinion, still better than the second game, and for that I give it an 8.5. Resistance: Fall of Man. Really solid first-person shooter franchise for the console. This one kind of just sets up the story. It's an alien invasion, and you're kind of playing as, well, obviously by the name, the resistance of whatever area you're in. It's usually different parts of the US, and it's all about fighting off the invasion force of the aliens. Really solid game, great gun gameplay. A lot of different variety in enemies and weapon types. Really fun first-person shooter campaign series if you can get your hands on these. I give it probably the first game probably a 7. It's solid, sets up the foundation for the rest of the games. Then next up we have Resistance 2. How the Resistance series kind of goes is first one's solid, sets up everything. 2, they refine a lot of the stuff, make the story a little more interesting. Basically have the same kind of gunplay and enemies. So slightly better than the first one. I give it a 7.5. Then we got Resistance 3, and this is the cream of the crop out of the 3. Basically, they took everything they learned from the first 2 games. The gunplay was amped up way better in this game, super smooth compared to the other 2 games. Story is really well done. Decently long campaign with a bunch of actual like kind of unique encounters, more different types of aliens, some mini-ish kind of boss fights in there, different weapons and stuff like that. So this game really basically continues the Resistance stories, but the gameplay is so polished in this game compared to the other ones. I give this one an 8.7. Then next up we got Saints Row 2. One of the better Saints Row games. This game's actually a lot of fun. It basically is like Grand Theft Auto, a little sillier, but in this one keeps the tone of you're an actual gangster, you actually run a gangster organization, and kind of that mix of gritty and comedic timing and really interesting characters. I give this one an 8. Then next up we have Saints Row the Third. My personal favorite out of the series. It's the one that got me into the series, so it kind of gets a little bit of nostalgia points there for me. Basically, I think the perfect balance of the more dark tones and more serious tones as the first 2 games. I think the story in the second game and kind of the characters in the second game are better, but the gameplay and gameplay mechanics and side objectives and stuff like that, and all the extra stuff that goes into making the game good is so much better in this game compared to the second one, just because of the optimization of it going forward. So I give this one an 8.2, slight edge over the second game, but there's definitely some things about the second game I prefer. Then next up we got Saints Row 4. Sorry for the dirty ass case. I need to get a new one to this to replace it. This one they go out in left field. Still a really good game. Basically you're like a president that's kidnapped by aliens, and you're also a superhero in a simulation. You have like superpowers. And this one's full goofy. But I actually enjoyed it. It's a fun co-op play if you have a friend that also owns the game. I would recommend getting the PS4 version just because it's a little more optimized and it's easier to run the co-op on. Still a really solid game. Some people like it, some people don't. I'm one of those people that enjoy it for what it is. I give it an 8. Then next up we got Shaun White Skateboarding. A pretty unique skateboarding game, to be honest, compared to a lot of the other ones I've played, and I'm a big skateboarding, snowboarding game fan. Basically it's like a single player story, kind of mission based one, where you have this big open world and basically there's a company or government trying to take over and lock down skate and basically make everything colorless and boring. And basically your job as a skateboarder with magical powers is to basically bring color and life back to the city through skating. I don't really get how it works, but it does. Honestly, an okay story, kind of just drives the plot on, but the skateboarding gameplay is actually pretty solid, and the eventually you gain abilities to like create rails in the air and like kind of float up in the sky and stuff like that. It adds honestly a pretty fun element to it. I give it probably like a 7. It's definitely worth it for a playthrough if you're into skateboarding games. And from positives to Shaun White games to probably one of my least favorite games I've ever played, this game is horrendous. As a longtime snowboarding and skateboarding game fan, I hated this game. The gameplay is just really bad. Story's okay. It kind of follows the same premise as the skateboarding one, where you kind of have like superpowers as kind of the extra gameplay element. But the main thing is the riding, the tricks, the open world gameplay is just so bad and boring that I couldn't even bear myself to finish the majority of this game. I'd probably give this one like a 2. I honestly really didn't like this game. Then next up we have Singularity. Really solid, unique FPS for the console. It almost has kind of like a BioShock horror vibe to it. Really unique first-person shooter, kind of like Cold War era, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. And I won't spoil too much of the story. It's kind of out there and unique and has little horror elements to it. As I said, very Bioshock-like. Really recommend it if you're into first-person shooters with more focus on single player. I give it a 7.8. Then next up, we got Skate 2. Fantastic skateboarding game. Really love this series. Basically, a kind of mix between a simulation and arcade style skateboarding game. Definitely leads a little bit towards the arcade, but more simulation than something like a Tony Hawk per se, and more focuses on lines rather than huge combos where you're stringing a bunch of tricks together all in one kind of long string. It's more about getting combos and hitting lines, kind of like what you would do in actual skateboarding. Really fun game. I recommend picking it up. I'd probably give it an 8. Then we got Skate 3, one of my favorite games for the console. In my opinion, it just takes all the gameplay elements of 2, improves on them, makes it a lot smoother, adds a pretty interesting feature for the campaign where you're making your own skateboarding brand. Definitely adds a unique element to it. Really well designed, open free roam kind of skate map on this one. I really enjoyed this game. I give it a 9. Then we got Sleeping Dogs. I'd say it could possibly fall in the hidden gem category by now, or at least underrated, I would say. Definitely. Basically, a kind of follows like a Saints Row, Grand Theft Auto style of story where it's like an open world city. You basically play as an undercover cop who's infiltrating the triads. Pretty decent story, actually has some good elements to it in terms of the story. Gameplay is a lot of fun in this game. It's a mix between like beat 'em up and shooting. Gameplay is really solid in this game, and there's a good bit of side activities to do as well. I give it a 7.5. If you're into these type of games, I would actually really recommend picking this up, and even if you're not, it could be fun for a playthrough for you. Then we have Sniper Elite version 2. Pretty solid stealth game. Definitely focuses on obviously the sniper combat more than anything. I got a little bored with it. I really just don't think I was in a stealth mood when I played this one, which I get into phases with stealth games, and if I don't get really into them, I tend to drop them occasionally, and this is one I dropped. Really good gameplay. The stealth elements are pretty well done, and the accuracy with the sniper, the types of shots you can do, and the mission variety is actually pretty good in the game. I give it a 7. Then we got SOCOM, U.S. Navy SEAL Confrontation. This is an online only game, I'm pretty sure. I played it a tiny bit when I got the game. I got it really late. It was like a bundle with a controller. I really wanted the controller, but it came with a game and it wasn't much more expensive than buying just a regular controller. So I was like, alright, I'll get this. Played a couple online matches. I was really young at the time, so I didn't get into it too much. The gameplay was solid, just really not for me. I was a COD kid back then. So for me, this is like a 5. I could see why people liked it. It just wasn't for me. I would say it's probably an 8 in quality. Just you can't play it right now, so I guess it would be like a 1 at that point. But probably for its time, I'd give it an 8. Then we got Soul Calibur 5. Probably one of the fighting games I actually got into the most in terms of multiplayer. Soul Calibur is one of those ones where it's like a 3D view instead of like a 2D fighting where you're fighting on only one plane. It's a pretty solid game. One thing that's really fun with these games is the character customization. You can make some wacky ass characters and then put them online and have them have the moveset of one of the characters in the game. It's not anything groundbreaking, but it's solid and it has a pretty good arcade ladder. So I'd give it an 8. It's a pretty good fighting game actually. Alright, last stack. First up we got South Park The Stick of Truth. Really awesome game. If you're like me and into the South Park series a lot, you'll really enjoy playing this game. It's basically like playing a South Park episode in terms of the look, feel, voice acting, style of the story delivery. It all fits like just basically playing a giant movie or episode of South Park. Combat's pretty good. It's just turn-based. Good decent bit of class variety, and being able to use a bunch of different characters from the series definitely adds for some replayability. I give it an 8.7. I really enjoy this game. Then next up we got Spec Ops: The Line. Really interesting shooter on the console. Play as, I don't know, squadron that kind of gets knocked down. I'm pretty sure it's in Dubai, and you're fighting this opposition resistance. And there's a bunch of twists and turns in towards the end that kind of change the perspective, I would say, without spoiling anything, on the entire thing and the operation and all that. Really, one, if you haven't played, I'd even recommend if you're not into first-person shooters picking this up. Just the story itself is so well delivered. Scenarios and stuff like that all work really well together to create, it's almost like playing a movie, I'd say. Probably give it like an 8.2 or something like that. Really good game. Then we got Splinter Cell Blacklist. I played this again, just like what I said with Sniper Elite version 2. This was one I picked up, wasn't really feeling stealth game at the time. Something else came out, or I picked something else up and I dropped it part way through. Splinter Cell games, always really solid. Stealth combat and stealth games in general. I've never been the biggest fan in terms of personally compared to a lot of other stealth franchises, but my dad was really big into them and I enjoyed watching him play it. I give it a 7 just for me personally, but I know a lot of people are really into these games. Then we got Splinter Cell Double Agent. This is definitely one my dad played more than me. I got a little farther into this one than Blacklist. I enjoyed the concept of it a little more and the story was a little more interesting to me. I give it a 7.5 just because I enjoyed it a little bit more. Split Second, really unique racing game. I've talked about this a lot on the channel. It's on one of my hidden gems videos for the PS3. Really unique racer. Basically you're playing as you're on like a TV reality show, and basically instead of like in other racing games where you would like slam people to the walls to get rid of them off the track, kind of like a Burnout, you'd basically save up boost or power to be able to activate environments like explosions, or a helicopter would drop oil, you would cause cars to explode on the side and take out people. So you would have all these different ways that the environment and the maps would interact and you could control to eliminate enemies. So it's definitely a really interesting take on the racing genre, and it has a pretty long campaign mode as well. I give this something like an 8.7. Really amazing game. Then next up we got SSX. Probably one of the most disappointing games of all time for me. Maybe I'll do that for a video. Games that disappointed me the most over my years. But this was one that's up there. I am a huge fan of SSX. SSX 3 is my favorite game of all time. But I was super excited for this when it came out. Bought it the day it came out with money I scrapped up for saving. I think it was from birthdays, and I got a newspaper route at that time. And I go buy the game, come home, and it's just kind of meh. Like, that's the best way to describe it. It was meh. Control scheme's different in this. It uses the stick kind of like a skate game to do the tricks and stuff, and that was fine. The map were okay. I really don't like the trend the newer SSX games went on since Out of Bounds on, where instead of having the big kind of competition with the really unique maps and stuff like that, they basically went to making it kind of, you're just out in the outback or on real mountains and stuff like that. I think it kind of got away from its roots in a lot of it, to be honest. I give it a 7. It's just okay. Then we got Street Fighter 4. Honestly, Street Fighter is not one of the fighting games I get into too much in terms of the multiplayer. It's just one I've never really gotten great at and don't really enjoy enough combat wise to put the time into it to try to get better at it. I did enjoy this one. The arcade and story in these games are always decent. I find the characters pretty interesting in Street Fighter. That's why I buy them every now and then. And the new one's actually fantastic. I give this one a 7. It was solid. I didn't play it too much, to be honest. Then next up we got Syndicate. This was another one from one of my Hidden Gems video. Really unique first-person shooter on the console. It's basically like a futuristic, kind of cyberpunk-y theme it goes for. You basically play as a kind of secret agent, kind of special agent who's like zooped up with all these powers. And there's a pretty, I would say pretty generic, like kind of action movie story going on, but it serves well, and it has some good twists and turns, and it's not too bad. The combat's really well done in this game, and it has kind of like mini parkour mechanics to it, which makes it pretty unique. I definitely recommend picking this up if you're into FPSs at all. I give it like a 7.7. Then coming up next we have Tekken 6, a really solid fighting game. I actually really enjoyed playing this one. Tekken 6 is another one like Soul Calibur, where you're fighting in like a circle rather than a straight line. So it adds those other planes to the fighting. And I really enjoyed this game, to be honest. I thought the campaign was, well, one, Tekken's story is like out in left field all the time. I can barely follow the thing. and this campaign's super long. I never finished it, but it has a pretty solid arcade ladder with some pretty good like kind of side modes and side bosses that will pop up to keep it interesting. And the roster in these games are massive, and it has some really good customization elements as well. Just a really solid, fun fighting game that even now you could pick up and have fun with the single player elements in it. I give it an 8. Then we got Tony Hawk's Proving Ground. This is a weird one. I don't think it's that great of a game. I don't really like the camera, and it kind of loses that kind of over-the-top feel of the other Tony Hawk games. You can still string together combos. It just doesn't have that feel and smoothness as kind of the Pro Skater ones and the Underground series has. It's still an okay game. I didn't get all the way through it, but I got like halfway through it. I give it a 5. It's okay. Then we got Twisted Metal. This is such a disappointing game. Big fan of the Twisted Metal series. The main one I played was, as a kid, I played Head On. It was the one on the PSP. I played the shit out of that game. That game's amazing. So I picked up this one hoping it would be good. And it's another one like SSX where it's just meh. It's just a lot of meh. The campaign's kind in arcade is kind of lame because you can only play as 3 characters and just use different riders' vehicles instead of giving us a bunch of different riders that each had their own story. It's just 3 stories, and the campaign's okay. It's not great. It kind of just services to push the thing along. The maps are decent, and the combat and riding's pretty good, like the actual driving stuff. Just all the different elements that made Twisted Metal what Twisted Metal was seems to be lacking in this game for some reason. So I'd give it a 5. It's okay. Alright, so then we got Uncharted series. I got into this game really late, to be honest. I think I played these games over the course of the last 4 years or something like that. I was really late to the party on these. The first one, I actually really enjoyed it. I like that this one's more focused on the shooting elements. I don't really like I know it's the main thing of Uncharted. I don't really like the just sit there, listen to dialogue and climb parts. And this one had, at least from my recollection, some of the least amount and focused on the third-person shooting, which I actually enjoyed. And I also like Drake's character in this one. I give this one an 8. Then we got Uncharted 2. This is a lot of people's favorites, and I could see why. Honestly, wasn't as interested in this one for some reason. I enjoyed the story. I thought the story was a lot more interesting in this one. Nathan's character is also really well done in this, and I think this one just suffered from too much climbing and too much downtime, I think, compared to the other ones for me. Still a really good game. I give it an 8 as well. It's not my favorite out of the series. Then we got Uncharted 3, probably my favorite out of the series. I haven't played 4 or what's the one with the 2 girls, whatever that one's called. I haven't played that one either. But out of the 3 I've played, this one's probably my favorite. Really enjoyed this one. I don't know if it's just recently biased, but I thought the set pieces, the environments and stuff like that to be more interesting. I thought the gunplay was a little more refined. The only thing that was bad in this game was Nathan himself was kind of a whiny B-word the entire game, and I didn't like how his character developed into this game. So that's probably the only thing I could say negative about this one. I give this one slightly better grade than the other 2 just because it's my personal favorite. I give it like an 8.3. Then we got Vanquish, really unique game for the console. This was another one on the PS3 Hidden Gems video. It's on one of my videos. This is made by Platinum Games. For those of you who don't know, made Bayonetta and Anarchy Reigns. And this follows their normal formula of being super flashy, super high paced, and tons of action. It's really short, which is probably the one knock I'd say for it. It's like a third-person shooter where he plays this kind of robot super soldier type thing, and he can like slide. He has super fast movement. There's a bunch of different kind of movement parkour elements to it that kind of make it unique. Some really good boss fight and music kind of ties it all together. I give it an 8 if you can pick it up for not a horrible price, because I think this is a pricey game now. Definitely worth it. Then next up we got Venetica. I don't know too much about this game. I played it. I got through like half of it. But I don't know too much about the studio or like the stuff behind it. I'm pretty sure it's like an indie game type thing. I would say kind of like a Legend of Zelda, like the newer ones kind of vibe to it and kind of style to it. Basically like that. You play as this girl, I think it's her husband. Yeah, I think it's her husband gets killed and you're basically going after for revenge. And it's like a little hack and slash game, but basically you're running at 10 to 15 frames the entire time. The cutscenes lagged a ton and everything just feels super choppy. So definitely wouldn't recommend it. If you're into the genre, I think it might be serviceable, especially if you're like into indie games, more obscure games. It would be worth a shot. Probably also it's pretty cheap to get. So I'd give it a 4. It's not like horrendously bad, but it's definitely not a great game. The next up, one of the more interesting games that I've played recently and one I really enjoyed is Wet. This is a third-person shooter hack and slash game for the PS3, and basically you play as this mercenary who gets hired to do a contract, and basically you just go around stabbing and shooting and blowing up people by like the hundreds. And what's really unique about this one is it has this like flashy over the top. It's basically like playing a Quentin Tarantino movie as kind of a main character in like a Quentin Tarantino action movie, where it's just so over the top, a lot of different camera flares, different camera angles that are kind of like artistic and weird, very crude and over the top story. Highly recommend playing this one if you're into shooters at all. It can be a little difficult. There are some difficulty spikes, but if you're into the first-person shooter genre, it shouldn't be an issue. Really recommend this game, actually. I'd probably give it an 8. I enjoyed this one a lot. Alright, then we got WWE 12. It's okay. It's a wrestling game. Kind of, in my opinion, the SmackDown vs. Raw games are where it's at. These ones are just okay. The campaign's still good. The game modes are still good. I think the combat and just the overall feel of the game's just a lot worse than these games. It's still fun if you're into wrestling, but I give it a 7.5. It's decent. Then last but definitely not least, we got 50 Cent, Blood on the Sand. This is a really fun game, to be honest. I think it's not an amazing game. It's not the most well-made game, but if you're just looking for a game that's just pure fun and stupid fun, I'd recommend this one. This is when you can turn your brain off. The story's just kind of served as a cheesy, super cheese action movie. It's got some 50 Cent G-Unit music in the back, so if you're into rap, especially if you're into the 50 Cent G-Unit kind of era, definitely good music. The gunplay's serviceable, it's pretty good, and it's just a fun... It's like you're playing through a stupid action movie where you're just kind of turning your brain off and enjoying it. That's the best way I can describe this game. I'd probably give it a 7.5. It's pretty solid, to be honest. Alright, so there you have it. That is my PS3 collection video for 2024. Hope you guys enjoyed it. There'll still be the PS5 collection video update at my normal time, which is usually late September, early November. So I will do that this year as well. Thank you all for watching, even if you just skip through to certain parts, or if you watch the entire thing. That's incredible, and I really appreciate it because it's going to be a long-ass video. But if I can get some new recommendations on games that are worth picking up, I definitely will eventually try to get around to some of them. Thanks again for watching. I remember everybody has some nerdiness at their core.